The Batman, 2004. To say that it played a pivotal role in my childhood is an understatement. From the world design, character arcs, to the dialogue, it's all done brilliantly, and you can tell it was done with care. The Batman 2004 is a underrated and often forgotten gem in the Batman media. But today, we're not going to be talking about the show as a whole, we're going to be talking about one specific character that I feel like is the best version of that villain. That being Ethan Bennett's Clayface.
Detective, am I under arrest?
Yo, Bruce!
Hey, Ethan.
Where you been, my friend?
Ethan Bennett was one of the most respected members of the GCPD, and Bruce Wayne's best friend. Whereas his partner, Detective Ellen Yin, saw things in black and white, Ethan saw the gray in almost everything, and was more willing to allow Batman to coexist with the GCPD. This friendship between Bruce and Ethan is something that's shown very well throughout the series. Their bond is real and strong, which makes it all the more heartbreaking when Ethan falls and Clayface rises. It's not just heartbreaking for Bruce and Ethan, but it's also heartbreaking for us, the audience, because we're watching that friendship be destroyed. This show does a great job at showing you the human sides to its characters, and Bruce and Ethan's friendship is a prime example of that. You see them playing basketball, going to lunch, going on walks together, but just like real-life human friendships, you also see them disagree. And let's take a look at Detective Ellen Yin. She also has a friendship with Detective Bennett and cares deeply for him. She even calls Bruce to have him check up on Ethan because he's had a rough couple of days.
Hello, Mr. Wayne?
Please, Detective. Bruce.
Look, Wayne, you and Bennett, Ethan, are best friends, right?
Well, since high school, why?
Well, he's had a rough couple of days. I was hoping you could talk to him.
But going back to Bruce and Ethan, you see them view certain things differently, but are ultimately fighting for the same cause. This mirrors the relationship between Bruce and Gordon, but with us actually seeing these moments of bonding, it makes it more elevated in a sense. In the rubber face of comedy, Ethan's superior, GCPD's chief, Angel Rojas, ordered the entire police force to take down every masked and costume freak in Gotham City. Ethan protested, defending Batman as an asset to the city, and credited him with helping to capture the Joker. In response, an infuriated Rojas threatened to suspend Ethan and told him to figure out where his loyalties lie. Ethan decided to prove that he's a good cop and attempted to take down Batman. This wasn't just a normal decision for Ethan. Ethan may not have known who Batman was, but he's built this relationship fighting alongside Batman for so long. This was truly a difficult decision. By going after Batman, he's showing Batman that he's like every other cop, and that hurts Ethan. In the Clayface of tragedy, Ethan, horrified by his transformation and unable to speak clearly due to his throat being full of clay, sought help in the city, but was attacked by the police, who used a fire hose to wash him down a drain. This act of the GCPD causes Ethan to spiral, further losing his sanity. His new body was something that he wanted to escape, but his newly warped mind was something that he needed to escape. He could feel himself clawing at his own skull, trying to do the right things, make the right decisions, but Ethan was fading. Ethan then kidnapped Chief Rojas and attempted to kill him, but was foiled by Batman and Yin. Yin and Batman tried to reason with him, but Ethan claimed that Joker didn't just melt his skin, but he also melted his mind. He then claims, "I'm a freak, inside and out."
You don't get it, do you? Joker didn't just melt my skin. He melted my mind. I'm a freak inside and out.
What Ethan didn't realize was, he wasn't just telling his partner and Batman that. He was telling his best friend that. Those words cut Bruce. Another friend, another family member, lost to insanity. Those words wouldn't just cut Bruce, for they would also cut Ethan. It wasn't just Clayface explaining what happened, it was Clayface bragging about being a freak. It was Clayface that was eager to kill Rojas. Ethan was battling for his life to stay in control. Ethan wanted to be cured, to be saved from this madness. In Clayface's, Ethan promised to give up his life of crime and to use his powers for good. Ethan seemed to have finally reformed. Ethan went on to hand over the Joker to the police without using excessive force, and even turned himself into the authorities, who took him to Arkham Asylum. However, Ethan did not completely regain Bruce's or Batman's trust. Ethan was eager to leave Arkham and to continue working as a police officer, although Batman refused to consider that request until Ethan was cured. Batman then decided that he could easily go back to crime. It was this show of will, this show of strength, that Ethan held on to. He truly used his powers for good and not for evil, and he remains in control the entire time. Ethan was happy for himself, for the first time in a long while. Ethan would then go on to fight a second Clayface. Together, Ethan, Batman, and Robin confronted Basil Karlo, the new Clayface. At the end of the episode, Ethan was cured from his condition when Batman fired an antidote into the two of them. Both were taken away to Arkham, and while Ethan was completely cured of his mutation, Basil Karlo still retained his powers. Before Ethan is escorted to Arkham, he promises Bruce to play a game of basketball after he finishes his sentence. In this moment, Ethan is freed of the insanity that he was once encased in, no longer a prisoner to his own mind. Ethan could think clearly, he could smile, he could laugh, and most importantly, he could be with friends and family. Like I said at the beginning of this video, this show does a great job at humanizing its characters. Not only is Ethan and Bruce looking forward to that game of basketball, but we, the audience, are too. We've spent so long with this friendship of theirs that we can't help but to want it to rekindle and go back to the way it was. In Artifacts, it was stated by Police Dispatch that Ethan was permanently cured and became the new chief of the GCPD in the year 2027. This gives Ethan the ending he deserves. He's a character that we couldn't help but to root for and hope all ends well for. His character arc is one that truly needs to be studied more and with more detail, because I just barely scratched the surface of this character. This journey of motivated cop to discouraged and hurt cop to the downfall when becoming Clayface, then back to being that headstrong, motivated cop, is such a heartbreaking and yet heartwarming adventure. The writers didn't want to just show you how these characters felt, they wanted you to feel how they felt. When Ethan is tortured by the Joker, we feel how Bruce felt. When Ethan and Bruce's friendship starts declining, we feel that same stress and the same emotions that come with a long-time friendship ending. When Ethan gains control, we're proud of him and rooting for him. When Ethan is cured, we're excited and happy, the same way Bruce is.
I've had a makeover since our paths last crossed.
Victor Freeze, aka Mr. Freeze, is one of my favorite villains in Batman's Rogues Gallery. A villain who isn't truly a villain at all. All he wants is to be with his wife, to love her, and to take care of her. But in order to do that, he must find the cure. Victor only commits his crimes in hopes of finding and/or creating that cure for Nora. His story is one of love, one of sadness, but that's not the Mr. Freeze we're looking at today. This version of Mr. Freeze has love for other things. Two things, specifically. Them being diamonds and anything that will enhance his ice abilities, such as liquid nitrogen. But before becoming Mr. Freeze, Victor Freeze started out as nothing more than a simple thief. After a successful diamond heist, he was suddenly pursued by Batman. After Victor crashes, he gets up and runs into a cryogenics laboratory where Batman chases after him. In an attempt to reclaim the diamonds he dropped, he fell into one of the freezing pods with a live exposed cable. Despite the Batman's attempt to help Victor, it proved futile, and Victor was presumed dead. However, Victor was electrocuted at the exact same time his blood froze in his veins, mutating him into a quasi-undead being who could generate extreme cold around him. It didn't take Victor long to convince the scientists who revived him to build a suit for him to keep his powers under control. This newfound power, these chilling abilities, gave Victor a sense of strength he hasn't felt before. Victor was so used to being walked on, ignored, so used to being weak. But now, he's someone different. Something different. It wasn't just a simple makeover. Everything about him had changed. Where before he would swerve out of the way to make sure he didn't hit the homeless man, he now wants nothing more than to encase everyone within Gotham in ice. Victor then became one of Gotham's most known criminals and went by the name Mr. Freeze. Victor later works with Firefly in their attempt to have the city showered in a never-ending winter. It wasn't just freezing Gotham and all of its citizens that Victor wanted. Victor wanted Gotham to be his kingdom, and he would be its emperor, ruling over its icy lands. In Artifacts, Mr. Freeze is terrorizing the citizens of Gotham again. However, since he's upgraded himself, he now goes by the name Freeze 2.0. After a fight breaks out between the Dark Knight and Victor, Batman shows his limitations in his old age when struggling to pull Freeze 2.0 down to the ground.
When did this get so hard?
This moment showed Victor that Batman can't keep this up forever, a moment in thought that Victor would not forget. He knew Batman would only get weaker and slower as time went on. An idea was waiting to bloom for Victor. After causing a plane to reroute and crash, Victor picks up a diamond from the crash site and states that his plan is to use it in his cryo cannon.
Its uniquely perfect structure will allow it to act as an energy amplifier for my cryo cannon, a machine with the power to alter this city's weather forever.
Both Batman and Nightwing charge towards Freeze, but are too late. The machine has started and the buildings begin to freeze solid. Victor then shoots Nightwing with an ice beam, freezing Grayson solid. Seeing his partner in such a state, Batman cannot pull himself up. Victor approaches the beaten and old Batman while charging his ice beam. Victor then freezes Batman where he stands, and so it appears that on that fateful day in the year 2027, Freeze 2.0 has won. Victor had taken down the Bat. He had finally become the Emperor of Gotham. All those years of being bested by the Bat had finally come to an end. He could now rule over Gotham as the king he always wanted to be. Or at least, so he thought. Victor was too busy soaking in his victory, too busy admiring his new kingdom to realize what the Batman had done. In his final stand, Batman remotely orders the Batwing to fire onto his position. Batman lies frozen solid in ice, no longer being able to move. Freeze, feeling victorious, walks away from the two frozen heroes. The Batwing then approaches in the sky and shoots at the Batman as ordered. The missiles fly and hit Freeze, Batman, and Nightwing. The heroes are then freed from the ice. This tunnel vision that Victor found himself in, just like in the past, would lead to his defeat. His anger and desire for glory blinds him to so many things, but it's those very two things that motivate him to keep him going. Victor is driven by his rage, by that need for glory, making this Victor the polar opposite of what we're used to seeing. As Freeze 2.0 struggles to get up, Batman takes his time to attack Victor. Freeze, however, swats the bat off of him and tries to gain stability again, but Freeze 2.0 is too weak to move. The Batwing then spirals towards Freeze to ultimately stop him. The Batwing crashes into Freeze's location, and both Batman and Nightwing rush to the crash site. To their disbelief, Freeze is missing. The idea has finally blossomed. Victor now understands what he must do in order to rule Gotham. He's waited this long, so what's another 1,000 years? The idea is now a plan that has been set in motion. A plan that Victor hopes will lead him to his icy kingdom. At Freeze 2.0's lab, Victor stumbles not too far before crashing on the ground. Freeze crawls to a bed and states that he will cryogenically freeze himself. Then, the people of the future will wake him so that he may reawaken in a world without Batman. Freeze 2.0 has reawoken, Victor goes on to terrorize the city like he did 1,000 years ago. As he's terrorizing the city, Victor laughs about being in a world without Batman. Victor isn't just seeing a world without Batman, he's seeing a world for the taking. A world that he can claim as his own icy wonderland. This was a dream that Victor had for literally over 1,000 years. A dream that gave him meaning in life. And now, it finally seems like his dream will come true. But Victor should have known it wouldn't be that easy. Suddenly, the Batman swoops down from one of the high buildings. The Dark Knight then hits Victor with the anti-freeze solution. Freeze 2.0 falls to the ground, defeated. After his loss, Victor sees that the Batman he faced was just one of many. Victor waited 1,000 years just to awake in a world with more than one Batman. His rage, along with his obsession of becoming the Emperor, blinded him. The story of Victor Freeze in the Batman 2004's universe is not one of love, but one of hate. The change in his story was a small change, but it made a big difference. Before, the Victor we knew was motivated by love, but the Victor we see in this is motivated by power. His ultimate goal is not to cure his sick wife, but to encase all of Gotham and its innocent civilians in ice forever. He was so determined to achieve that evil goal that he froze himself and waited 1,000 years for Batman to die. This show actually paints Victor as a true villain.
Welcome to my lair, Batman, where questions are answers and yin is yang.
Edward Nygma, aka the Riddler, is normally just a guy who's crazy, highly intellectual, and also obsessive, with his two biggest obsessions being Batman and riddles. Throughout the years, we've had a lot of different stories for Edward, but very few of them can you actually sympathize with. The Batman 2004's take on the Riddler still maintains those aspects I listed before, but now, he's more human than ever. The show takes you on a journey to show you how life actually affected Ed, how trauma and betrayal reshaped him into becoming the Riddler. Like I said in the Clayface and Mr. Freeze videos, this show does a great job at humanizing its villains. The closest thing we've gotten to seeing such things in Ed's life, as far as shows go, would be the version of him we see in the show Gotham. In that show, you could see how awkward he was, how he struggled to fit in, but never gave up on trying to do so. Then, we can see his alter ego manifesting, breaking into his mind. But that show is a topic for another video. Back to the 2004 Riddler. As a child, Edward Nygma was a clever boy who was disliked by his father. His father was confused by and jealous of his son's intelligence and belittled him for it. Unlike his son, he was an average sports fan and wanted his son to be the same. At one point, he grabbed a bat and a ball, then threw the ball at one of Edward's creations. Edward never liked him and had a deep hatred for him. With this look into his past, we see that Edward was not only a gifted child when it came to intellect, but he also grew up in an abusive home. This takes inspiration from the comics, where Riddler's father was abusive. In both cases, we see that Edward was a victim, a child who deserved better, and if he had better, he probably would not have become a criminal. He wouldn't have been holding on to that deep hatred like he was growing up with the father he did. When he was older, Edward got a job at a university, where he and his partner and possible love interest, Julie, invented a device that would enhance the human brain, giving its user amazing brain power. During the development stages of the device, a man named Gorman kept trying to get Edward to sell off the right of the invention to him, but Edward refused the offer. It wasn't about the money for Edward, it was about helping people, progressing society. It was about his contribution to the world. Edward was finally at a place where his brilliance could be put to good use, a place where he could make a difference. But sadly, this side or version, if you will, of Edward that we see starts becoming lost in the shadows of madness. During the demonstration of the device to the Dean, the device malfunctioned. Edward subsequently accused Gorman of sabotaging the device and decided to get vengeance years later by booby-trapping Gorman's house house with deadly puzzles and traps, turning his house into one big death trap. While trying to survive his house of horrors, Gorman called the police, a call that was intercepted by the Batman, who then went to the house and saved Gorman. Edward escaped, but was inspired by Batman's appearance. Hoping to increase his chances of success against the Batman, he dons a new identity as the Riddler. This new twisted version of Edward was not only evil, but also an evil genius who thought what he was doing was just. Since a child, he's felt like he's been treated unfairly. He's felt the blame of others, the anger of others. He feels like everything that happened to him was injustice, and with this newly warped mind, he thinks what he's doing is justified, believes it to be righting a wrong that they themselves didn't want to right. In the episode Riddler's Revenge, Batman and Riddler hide in a shipping container to save themselves from an explosion in their previous fight, but the container then falls into the sea. While underwater, the Riddler explains his origins, and explains to Batman that he was a fundamental component to create what Gotham calls the mastermind criminal, Riddler. In this moment, we're seeing Edward reawaken for a small moment. He sets aside his obsessions to open up and get some things off of his chest. A moment of vulnerability that Edward hasn't given anyone in a very long time. He's almost confiding in Batman. And with that, we see that Edward isn't completely gone, but only suppressed due to the rage and hatred in his heart taking over. This insanity that crept in Ed's mind no longer allows him to just let things go. And it's that same insanity that fuels the hatred which ignites the rage in his heart. After narrating his origin, such as his childhood and time at the university, Batman gives the Riddler a hint that helps him realize Gorman wasn't the one that sabotaged the device after all. They then escape together. As Batman tries to determine who's approaching on a boat, the Riddler punches Batman to the ground. Riddler, standing over the beaten Batman, prepares to kill the hero with the sharp end of his cane. Thankfully, Robin appears and stops the Riddler from executing the Dark Knight. As Robin helps up his friend, he notices the Riddler and his henchmen escaping. And just like that, the Riddler was back. With that hint that Batman gave him, that hatred and rage had been reignited. Edward finally realized who really set him up. And with that revelation, a new scar from betrayal was placed upon him. More unjust pain, more lies and betrayal from someone who he thought cared. The fire of hate was reborn in his heart, but this time, it was greater. In the same science lab Edward worked in long ago, he enters to find Julie working. Julie recognizes his voice and she knows exactly why he is here. She then smirks and begins to explain why she sabotaged their device on that fateful day. Riddler orders his henchmen to grab Julie. One by one, Edward places their invention all over Julie's face. Edward then grabs the controller, preparing to have Julie's mind explode. Her life being placed in Edward's hands like this gave him peace of mind, knowing with the simple turn of that dial, all that pain and destruction she caused in his life would be over, along with her life. And like I said before, he believes what he's doing is just. He believes it to be completely fair and is justified in his mind. And in this moment, he's righting the ultimate wrong. However, Batman and Robin then arrive. A fight begins, but the scuffle ends shortly. As the heroes prepare to leave, Batman orders Robin not to cut Julie free from her seat, and to instead let the police deal with her. The Dark Knight then asks Robin one last riddle.
When is a villain not the villain?
They then all look to the Riddler, who begins to cry. However, Edward wasn't crying because he lost. He was crying because now that he knows that she was the one who set him up, and with him being taken back to Arkham, he's now forced to deal with all of those emotions that he's been suppressing. Those emotions came flooding in, drowning Edward in pain. Edward truly feels as if he has no one. He feels alone. All Edward wanted to do was help the world, and for that, he was used, manipulated, and backstabbed. This show walks us through the two lives and mindsets of Edward. We got to see a side of Edward that we could actually sympathize with. And that, my friends, is why, in my opinion, the 2004 The Batman Show had the best Riddler. at least as far as animated shows go. Something else that made this show so amazing, outside of its writers, was its great cast of voice actors. I should have touched on this in the other videos, but Steve Harris as Ethan Bennett in Clayface, Clancy Brown as Mr. Freeze, and Robert Englund as Edward Nygma brought so much life to these characters. Then, you have the phenomenal character designs. Like with the Riddler, his design takes massive inspiration from Marilyn Manson, which without a doubt is the best design we've ever gotten for the Riddler.
Sir, I meant we should try making honest money. Ow! Shut up, dummy!
Arnold Wesker, aka the Ventriloquist, is another character we've seen portrayed differently throughout the years. However, two things stay the same: his illness and the depressing story behind him. Arnold Wesker in the 2004 The Batman Show is a simple man. All he wants is to bring a smile to people's days. That's it. He just wants to make people happy. But his alter, on the other hand, all he wants is money. And all of it. It's about control and power for Scarface. But before Scarface warped Arnold's mind, Wesker was a famous voice actor for a kids' TV show. Once the show ended, Wesker did other shows with a new set of puppets, but those proved to be unsuccessful and were cancelled. This marked the end of Wesker's career on television. No longer was he able to land a job doing what he loved, and that broke Arnold's heart. However, sometime during one of those shows being cancelled, Scarface started to manifest himself into Arnold's mind. So much so that Scarface became the dominant alter. Every negative emotion and thought Arnold had would come from Scarface. One night, when Arnold Wesker and his friend Scarface were booed off stage, Arnold returned with Scarface later that night and robbed the entire audience, turning to a life of crime ever since. Everyone knew that without Arnold Wesker, there was no Scarface. The only problem was, Arnold didn't know that. Arnold truly believes Scarface is alive, and not only does he think he's alive, but Arnold is scared of him. Scarface has threatened and abused Arnold time and time again, and because of that, Arnold will follow Scarface's every command out of fear. It's seriously depressing watching the physical and verbal abuse take place, especially knowing that it's just coming from himself. It's sad to think that he sees himself in these ways, as a dummy, a failure, as pathetic. It hurts knowing that not only is his self-esteem low, but his self-confidence is too. And it's those two things being as low as they are that make his alter speak about him that way and treat him so poorly. In the episode A Fistful of Felt, Arnold is being escorted back to his cell when Strange stops Wesker's guards so that the doctor can speak to the patient. Strange suggests that the ventriloquist takes part in a certain program that the asylum offers to help his problem. Wesker almost immediately agrees, but Scarface, of course, shoots the idea down.
Well, we'll do whatever will make us upstanding citizens, Professor Strange.
Speak for yourself, dummy.
In that quick moment, we're seeing how desperate Arnold is to be freed from Scarface. We see that he's willing to undergo any treatment to be cured. He doesn't want to live a life of crime. He doesn't want to live a life of causing pain onto others. But then we see the dominant alter taking back control and shutting down Professor Strange's proposal, which again, the dominant alter does want to live a life of those things. The sad part is, what Arnold doesn't realize is those thoughts are his own. A part of him wants to be doing those things, but only a part that's controlled by Scarface. If Scarface isn't around, that side of Arnold doesn't exist, as we'll see later in this episode. Back at Arkham Asylum, after much time had passed, Professor Strange congratulates Arnold Wesker. He is now free and completely rehabilitated. Wesker looks at his left hand and sees Scarface no longer on it. Wesker then bursts into tears and thanks Hugo Strange for his work. Arnold is finally freed from Scarface, and now we can see just how happy Wesker can be without Scarface, albeit for a short amount of time. It still shows us that this side of Arnold really does just long for a life of making others happy. He gets his joy from passing joy down to others, which honestly is so sweet and nice. Then we get to see his new friend and puppet, Mr. Snoots, who acts and sounds nothing like Scarface, which shows us that softer side of Arnold. However, all good things in Gotham must come to an end. The ventriloquist returns home with multiple bags of groceries. Arnold congratulates his friend and puppet, Mr. Snoots, for such a good job, but Mr. Snoots is nowhere to be seen. Once opening up the refrigerator, Arnold finds Mr. Snoots laying on the shelf, missing one of his eyes. Seeing how connected Arnold is to Mr. Snoots is not only so sweet, but it's also so sad. Watching him be destroyed over the death of Mr. Snoots shows you just how sympathetic Arnold really is. This loss means a great deal to him. It deeply affected him, not just emotionally either, but it also greatly impacted his mental state, which brought him back down into a vulnerable state, which our poor Arnold did not need to be in, especially with who's behind him. Wesker, frustrated that his friend had been murdered, turns around to find Scarface sitting in a chair. The evil puppet welcomes his old puppeteer. Wesker then yells at Scarface, saying for once he was happy.
How could you? For once I was happy! Why couldn't you stay out of my life?
Scarface quickly puts the ventriloquist in his place, and the two become an evil pair once again. The fear, the low self-esteem, low self-confidence, mixed with the vulnerable state, put Arnold back in the same situation he was in before. Only now, Scarface was becoming more distrustful of Arnold. What we, the audience, can take away from that is Arnold doesn't trust himself. He doesn't trust his own actions, which is incredibly sad. After a somewhat failed heist at the museum, Scarface and his henchmen talk about their next move on the set of Wesker's old TV show. Scarface says someone double-crossed them. The puppet ultimately assumes it was Wesker, who swears it wasn't him. The henchmen finish tying up Arnold to the train tracks. Scarface then orders the henchmen to activate the train. Suddenly, a cartoony robotic train rides along the tracks, approaching the ventriloquist. Scarface, still attached to Arnold's hand, is sentencing Wesker to death, but in reality, Arnold is sentencing Arnold to death. And with that, we see that Arnold is willing to die to be freed from Scarface, to be freed from all this pain, as well as to be freed from causing pain onto others. He just wants all of this to end, which again is really sad. It hurts seeing Arnold this broken, this distraught. Batman then tries to talk to Wesker, telling him that Scarface doesn't control him, but after Scarface yells at Arnold, Wesker doesn't listen. Batman then shows Scarface the real rat, Mr. Snoots. After throwing Mr. Snoots to Wesker, Snoots then admits to tipping off the police, which angers Scarface and causes the two of them to fight until Arnold frees himself. With the train about to hit Arnold, Batman swings in and saves Wesker, but the ventriloquist couldn't hold on to Mr. Snoots or Scarface. Both of them are crushed and killed by the train. Mr. Snoots in that fight represented Arnold's will and his urge to be a better person and to stop being a criminal. With the train killing Mr. Snoots, Arnold's heart was broken once more. More intense pain was placed on his fragile mind. However, the situation wasn't all bad. Scarface also died, and with his death, Arnold was able to let go of that side of himself yet again. He may have lost a friend, but it wasn't in vain. Mr. Snoots sacrificed himself to set Arnold free from Scarface, which, if you ask me, my friend Arnold Wesker over here definitely needs to be freed from Scarface. He deserves better. He doesn't deserve to feel the way he feels, especially when it comes to himself. Arnold is a good guy with a fragile mental state who just needs help. If he's offered a solution and a way to be freed from Scarface, we see that he's well capable of living a life life without crime and is beyond happy to be doing so. It's genuinely sad seeing that happy lifestyle he earns for being ripped from him. Then when you think about Hugo Strange planting Scarface back at his apartment after mutilating his new friend Mr. Snoots, it makes it that much more depressing.
Did someone say cute and cuddly?
Who are you?
I'm Ragdoll!
Ragdoll is a thief and triple-jointed contortionist. With the latter skill, he's capable of bending his body in all sorts of impossible ways, and even able to survive methods that would kill other people, such as being caught in the gears of a clock. Normally, the Ragdoll we see is a lot more unhinged, with him even creating a cult in his later years within the comics. But the Ragdoll we're talking about today is a lot less violent and is more so on the side of comedy. The Ragdoll within the 2004 The Batman series acts more childlike, with even his threats being heavily masked behind silly jokes. Ragdoll is more of the just go with the flow type of person in this show, with nothing really upsetting him. Even when he loses a score or a fight, he still maintains that friendly, childlike attitude. For Ragdoll, it's all about entertainment and fun, not complete and utter chaos. He's a showman, and he enjoys showing off. Ragdoll is a formidable opponent to the Batman, but an even bigger adversary of Catwoman. In the episode Ragdoll to Riches, Ragdoll and Catwoman race to gain several priceless items while crossing paths with the Batman. One of those items were a set of emeralds called Cat Eyes. The emerald set was rumored to be hidden in the Gotham Clock Tower by a mobster in the 1930s. Though never found, it was enough to pique the interest of Catwoman and Ragdoll, falling into a trap set by the Batman. For Ragdoll, this isn't just a score, it's a chance to get back at Catwoman for an earlier encounter, as well as an opportunity to show both Catwoman and Batman just how wonderful of an entertainer he really is. It's a chance to show both parties his showmanship, which is something that Ragdoll can't resist. After a lengthy and spectacular battle, Ragdoll gets trapped within the gears of the clock caused by Batman in a thrown battering. Catwoman then approaches Ragdoll as he makes an offer to split the emerald set if she gets him out of the gears. Catwoman refuses the offer and takes both emeralds. Batman then appears, and with a look alone, he gets Catwoman to hand over the emeralds. Catwoman then leaves, and afterwards, Ragdoll smiles and asks Batman for a hand. Going back to him just wanting to have fun, he's not even upset he lost his score, nor is he upset that he's being taken to prison. This was all one big fun game to Ragdoll, similar to Joker in the sense that they both commit these crimes for the pure entertainment of it. It's not only fun to them, but the in-between moments are also funny to them. However, that's where the comparisons come to an end. You see, Ragdoll doesn't want to kill or necessarily even hurt people. He just wants to have juvenile fun. After the episode Ragdoll to Riches, his next appearance would come to be in the episode Team Penguin, where we don't see much of him, but it further shows that childlike personality of his. He pops out of Penguin's hat and makes a joke about pulling a supervillain from a hat. As Penguin tries to grab the hat, Ragdoll throws it to his other hand and then back to the original, ultimately giving it to Penguin. After talking for a bit, Killer Moth is introduced, and upon entering the room, Firefly and Ragdoll start making jokes about his name and outfit. Rather than taking the situation serious like Penguin or even Killer Croc, Ragdoll is making sure that this group partnership is nothing short of fun and jokes. Sure, the money is a good benefit, but again, for Ragdoll, it's all about entertainment. Ragdoll's showmanship comes before anything, which is something that I really like. I like that they went with this kind of personality. I feel like it fits his abilities and design in the show perfectly. The writers and artists did an amazing job with the recreation of him. Having characters like him in a show, along with complex and heartbreaking characters like Ethan Bennett's Clayface, the Ventriloquist, the Riddler, and so on, really creates this perfect blend. making the world feel more alive and diverse. At an unknown warehouse, Killer Croc swims through the sewers. As he pops out of the water, he notices two guards and strikes them with his tail. Then, Ragdoll hops out of Killer Croc's backpack and climbs into a small vent. Ragdoll exits the vent and finds the guard watching the cameras. Ragdoll knocks the guard out with one punch and then disables all the security. Nothing really of note here other than his normal shenanigans. He does, however, scare the guard by saying boo before striking him, which goes back to what I said about him making sure this group partnership is nothing short of fun and jokes. He can't resist the urge to make an impression on everyone he comes across. After a fight with Batman and his sidekicks, Team Penguin makes an escape in Penguin's ice cream truck, and all the villains begin to celebrate their victory. Afterwards, Ragdoll suggests changing the team name to Villains United, to which Penguin rejects. Ragdoll knew Penguin would reject the name change. He just wanted to add on to the running joke between the rest of the crew of not liking the name Team Penguin. He knows it's starting to annoy Penguin, which makes it all the more funnier to him and the rest of the crew. As I said before, it's all about having fun for Ragdoll. Now, Team Penguin has a new mission, and that is to break into the building owned by the millionaire Robert Howard. Penguin then tells the crew the rest of his plan, which is to disable the security cameras, use the chemical they stole to burn down the door to the vault, and to take the ruby-encrusted penguin. This prize is something that only the Penguin wants. Croc is the most upset about this news, but even Ragdoll is a bit disappointed and angry it seems, which is really the only time we ever see him angry. After Killer Moth arrives at the building where Team Penguin is, he falls out in a cocoon. Penguin sarcastically suggests they buy him a wreath. Killer Croc is done with the team, he says, and walks away frustrated. Penguin doesn't mind. After all, more for the rest of them. However, Ragdoll and Firefly decide to walk away too. I told you they were getting fed up with Penguin, and I'll say again, can you really blame them? Ragdoll is getting bored of all this seriousness. He lives for fun and excitement, not for whatever this is. The cocoon burst open to reveal a mutated Killer Moth. Killer Moth demands respect from the other villains, and afterwards he says that Penguin is still their leader. Ragdoll, Killer Croc, and Firefly, terrified of the new Killer Moth, happily rejoin the team. So just like with him being angry, this is really the only time we ever see Ragdoll showing fear. Up until this point, it was like he had zero concept of fear. I guess years of putting yourself inside of places like the inside of plot gears really takes away that worry and fear of most things. After Batman and his sidekick show up, a fight begins. Batgirl takes on Firefly, Batman takes on Killer Croc, and Robin takes on Ragdoll. Robin swings himself into a vent with Ragdoll approaching. Ragdoll then says,
"Let's not make this too easy for me."
And after going in, Ragdoll quickly gets dealt with by Robin. After his defeat, we don't see him again within the episode. Ragdoll does make a cameo in the episode Rumors, but only a small one, even smaller than this episode, so we won't go over that episode. But to go back to what I said earlier about him being a great adversary to Catwoman and being slightly similar to Joker, in the episode Ragdoll to Riches, Ragdoll is very much Catwoman's Joker, which is something that I wish they would have played more into when using him for another episode. He just makes such a good villain for Catwoman to face off with every so often. Another thing that made this version so good was the brilliant voice actor behind him, that being Jeff Bennett. The tone and overall pattern of his speech fits him so well, and it creates this funny yet slightly unnerving vibe to him, which in my opinion works perfectly. Then you have his design, which again is done brilliantly. The homemade look to it, the different colored patches, the sinister yet endearing smile, all comes together beautifully. This is yet another outstanding recreation of a character done by the outstanding team behind the 2004 The Batman series.
Hello, Gotham. I am Dave.
The criminal mastermind known as Dave is nothing more than an AI created by Hugo Strange, and as a result of that, Dave is merely just an external part of Hugo. Dave doesn't have a personality of its own. Instead, it's simply a mashup of Strange and other villains. But all of those MOs and obsessions created a version of Hugo without the same desire. Hugo Strange within the 2004 The Batman universe doesn't want to become Batman, he wants to kill Batman. Dave, however, having the quote personality of the Riddler and possibly Bane, created this desire for unmasking Batman rather than killing him. Strange also made Dave believe it wasn't just an AI program, but was instead a criminal's mind trapped within a digital prison. Once it had obtained a body, Dave was finally a full being, if you will. Still not a person, nor is it alive, but Dave's AI is convinced it is. It truly believes it's a living human trapped within a digital prison. But even if the AI was trapped, the desire for escape is artificial. An artificial desire created for the sole purpose of making it seem like Hugo Strange had nothing to do with the escape. Even Dave's desire to unmask Batman is an artificial desire, an urge and obsession that isn't real simply because Dave isn't a real person. It can't have those things because it's not alive. But once again, Dave isn't aware of that, which would be sad if Dave was originally a person. However, it wasn't. It's a machine, created by a madman with the sole purpose of being a criminal. And Dave made a great criminal. Dave managed to drain all of the bank accounts within Gotham at once. Dave would then go toe-to-toe with the Batman and win, proving to Batman that it's not only intelligent, but it's also a more than well capable fighter as well. Later on, using that same intelligence, Dave would deduce the Batman's identity, something that even Hugo Strange himself couldn't do. Which I guess makes this external part of Hugo better than the real Hugo, as it was not only able to deduce the Batman's identity, but it was also able to beat the Batman twice, making Dave the superior one out of the two. However, even with all that intellect and all that capability, there was one thing that Dave and Hugo didn't account for, and that was Dave to question itself. Its own creation, its origin story, something that Dave ultimately lacked, as it was just a composite of other villains' MOs and backstories. This revelation broke Dave, rendering it glitching and confused, which would lead to its defeat. Dave would come back within the comic The Batman Strikes issue 34. However, in that issue, Dave only has the quote personality of Joker and even refers to itself as such. This new Dave still proved to be a capable fighter, but was ultimately defeated by Batgirl and Robin, where at the end of the fight, Batgirl hits Dave with a taser, presumably bringing down the mechanical mastermind for good. After that issue, we would never see Dave within this universe again. Dave may be gone, but Dave will never be forgotten. I know it might sound like I don't have any feelings for Dave as a character, but I actually do really like the concept of Dave. And I love the voice actor behind Dave, that being Jeff Bennett, who yes, also voiced Ragdoll. Then you have Dave's design, which is absolutely solid. Dave is a good character overall, and I completely understand why fans love him so much. I mean, Dave does have the best qualities of the other villains, but for me, I really like the characters like the Ventriloquist, where you see that human and kind-hearted side, but also see the fall into insanity. For me, there's something so beautiful about it. But again, that's not me saying Dave is a bad character. On the contrary, actually. I think Dave fits the overall tone of the show perfectly, especially with its design and voice.
Who are you? Arthur Brown, from the show! Huh?
Arthur Brown, aka Cluemaster, was an intellectually gifted kid who accomplished many things while earning awards in contests and commercial success. With this success, he would eventually make it onto a TV show called Think, Think, Thunk, which is where Arthur's downfall would start. All this success and all this intelligence started giving Arthur a sense of confidence, and that confidence led to a bit of narcissism. He started to feel better than others, simply because he felt like he knew more. He felt superior to those who weren't as knowledgeable, and it was that same superiority complex that would cause Arthur to act out the way he did after losing to Yelena. Not only did he feel cheated because the question she was given was, quote, easier, but he was also crushed at the fact that she beat him, making her the superior one, which broke Arthur's mind. Arthur quickly threw a temper tantrum on live television, saying how the show was rigged, which prompted his mother to file a lawsuit against the show. Now, with Arthur's mom taking legal action, Arthur is fully convinced that they set him up and that he's still the superior one. With that revelation, he's become a full-blown narcissist. The possibility of him being incorrect was not an option in his mind. He believes he knows the answers to all things, making it impossible for him to ever be wrong. Going back to the lawsuit, however, the show's producer, Herbert, possesses a significant amount of wealth and has extensive connections at the Gotham City Hall, causing the lawsuit to be rejected, culminating in Arthur going into hiding in his house out of shame and anger. That shame and anger would eat away at Arthur, so much so that Arthur would turn his back on his future and devote his life to revenge, obliviously wasting away both his talents and future, all because of an old and forgotten TV show and the hatred he held for the people who participated in his, quote, downfall. After years have passed, Arthur dons a new identity as the Clue Master. Using this new identity, Clue Master had his henchmen capture Ross, Yelena, and Herbert, making them all compete in a mock-up version of Think Tank Thunk. In this moment, Clue Master is finally able to exact his revenge, and with that, it's feeding that narcissistic personality of his tremendously. Statistically knowing his hostages will likely ask a question pertaining to the books he gave them, he feels overly confident and is blatantly egotistical. And it was that same arrogance that would lead to his defeat. Eventually, Batman showed up, having tracked Arthur down to his headquarters, which was just his mother's house. Upon entering the room, Clue Master challenged Batman to an all-or-nothing round, one question of Batman's choice on any topic, and if Arthur loses, he'll let the hostages go. But we all know that's a lie, and is not the case. Batman decides to ask Clue Master one question he does not have the answer to, and that's, what's the true identity of the Batman? Clue Master angrily demands Batman to ask another question, but Batman refuses, which sends Arthur back into that same headspace that he was in when he was a kid. Embarrassed, confused, and angry. All of those emotions rushing through Arthur's mind came out, just like it did when he was a kid. But this time, in a more violent way. He attempts to send the hostages into a vat of acid. However, Batman locks the cables with 2 batarangs, preventing it from dropping. The two then begin fighting, which ends with Batman using his grapple to pull Clue Master down, ultimately defeating him. Arthur would go on to cameo within the episode Rumors, as well as appearing in the comics. But the main issue involving him, that being the Batman Strikes issue 32, only shows more of that same arrogant personality I've already explained, so I won't cover that. Arthur Brown started out as a promising child, but quickly turned into the revenge-driven monster known as Clue Master, an arrogant criminal driven by hate. I would say this is a sad story, but Arthur is sad in a different definition. He let his god complex take over and became a horrible person. He treated others horribly, which was a choice, and because of that, I can't say that his story is sad. His story is one of anger, hate, and arrogance. And his reasoning for holding all that anger and hate isn't a tragic reasoning. It's a rather pathetic reason, if you ask me.
I won your race, so I'll collect the prize for my favorite charity.
Gearhead, or Nathan Finch, is a criminal street racer who operates with advanced forms of nanotechnology. Nathan's right arm is cybernetic and has cores that send out a nanotechnological virus which infects the targeted vehicle and alters it into a yellow-colored, more high-tech version with advanced features. His right eye is also cybernetic, which helps him navigate the roads. Nathan is cocky, as well as selfish, resulting in him coming off a bit simple-minded. He's also highly addicted to the rush of high speeds. Nathan loves the thrill and excitement of going fast. Then, when you mix crime in with it, it creates the ultimate rush for Nathan, a rush that Nathan longs for. It's really not about the money he earns through the crimes. It's purely about the rush that comes with it, along with the high-speed getaway that follows the crime. Nathan also loves a challenge, so when Batman presents him with one, he's quick to take him up on it, showing Batman not only how fast he can go, but also how full of himself he is. Every step along the way, Nathan is bragging while also trash-talking Batman, which goes back to him being cocky and a bit simple-minded. He can't help himself but to brag and talk down on his quote opponents, as he feels as if he's the best. Nathan also seems to want a bit of recognition, as at the beginning of the episode, after he steals from the charity race, he announces his self-made nickname, Gearhead, to the audience. With that, it shows us that Nathan isn't just chasing a rush, but he's also chasing a sense of notoriety. He enjoys the eyes of the masses being on him. It makes the high speeds and the crimes that much more exciting. Knowing dozens if not hundreds of people are watching him who are potentially impressed by him gives Nathan a great sense of satisfaction. But the satisfaction that was provided wasn't sustainable. The thrill and rush would wear off, ultimately leaving Nathan in need once again, culminating in him committing more crimes to reach that high again. To him, this rush and high isn't just a desire like it is for most. It's his reason to live. That rush gives Nathan meaning, and this meaning was something that he couldn't find anywhere else. But it was that same meaning that would lead to his downfall. Batman, along with Batgirl, outrace Nathan and defeat him. As Nathan tries to steal the Batmobile by injecting his cords into it, he's electrocuted, as the Batman tells him that he reversed the effects of the virus so that he can't infect the vehicle. That desire, that meaning of existence he had, ultimately led to his downfall. His stubbornness and addiction clouded his mind, which again goes back to him being a bit simple-minded. He lacks judgment outside of racing, making any situation outside of a car a confusing and boring situation for him, which is why he ignored Batman's warning and got electrocuted twice. He couldn't be bothered to care, and that careless attitude would more or less lead to him defeating himself. Gearhead, or Nathan, would go on to cameo within the episode Rumors, as well as appearing within the comics, with the comic issues he's in being The Batman Strikes, issue 22, issue 36, and issue 39. But much like Cluemaster, it only shows more of the personality that I've already explained, so I won't go over them. I truthfully love the concept of Gearhead. His abilities are not only unique, but they're also wicked. Gearhead's design also stands out, mostly due to the bright yellow, but also because it's one of the more simple yet fitting designs within the show. Much like Ragdoll, the simplistic nature of the design really drives it home. Then, you have his voice actor, Will Friedle, which if you didn't know, voices Terry McGinnis in Batman Beyond, which just makes Gearhead that much better. Gearhead, or Nathan Finch, is yet another character I wish they would have used more throughout the show. Imagine the kind of cybernetic advancements he could have gotten. I also wish we would have gotten to see a bit more of his actual personality outside of his normal trash talk and arrogance. But regardless, Gearhead truly was a great addition to the show. I really love how the world isn't just made up of the most well-known villains, but instead has a healthy mix of popular and lesser-known villains. It really helps flesh out this Gotham and universe in general.
You should never have put yourself in my sights again. Or are things not quite as they appear?
Delbert Billings, aka Spellbinder, is a three-eyed mystic with the ability to induce both hypnosis and visions onto his victims. We don't get to see much of Spellbinder's personality within this series, but throughout the episode The Butler Did It, we do see that Spellbinder has an interest for money and other things of value, but that's far from his ultimate goal. You see, Spellbinder had his eye on something far more important than money, and that was power. He didn't just train all of these years for the sake of using these abilities to simply obtain money. To him, that's petty. Beneath him, even. Spellbinder would use these abilities to obtain something that would significantly boost his powers. This something that Spellbinder is after is called the Eye of Sarkana. To others, it's just a valuable gem, but to Spellbinder, it's a source of power, and that power was something that Spellbinder was deeply obsessed with. So in order to achieve this gem, Spellbinder snuck into the charity event disguised as a photographer. Using this disguise, Spellbinder made it seem like he was taking a picture of Bruce Wayne and the other two millionaires, but in reality, he hit them all with his hypnosis flash and put them all under his spell. A spell that he would activate at a later date. The quote picture at the charity event was just the first step in gathering the gem. Spellbinder was not only a skilled hypnotist, but was also a master strategist. By using his abilities, he himself never has to actually commit the crime, which allows him to remain within the shadows while the eyes of the masses are all on his hypnotized victims. By doing this, he's not only keeping the heat off of him, but it also allows for him to oversee the operation, ensuring that everything goes according to plan. Once Spellbinder was in position near the charity event, he activated Bruce Wayne's and the other two millionaires' hypnosis. However, Bruce was donning the cowl at this time, so instead of Bruce and the other two millionaires, Batman joins the millionaires in stealing the gem in order to bring it back to Spellbinder. This was something that Spellbinder didn't account for. Truly an unexpected surprise. Batman gives the gem to Spellbinder, and Spellbinder shows his curiosity as to how Batman got put under his hypnosis, but Batman breaks free due to Alfred calling on the Batwave, making Spellbinder think it was just a trick, which allows Batman to recover the gem and quickly attack Spellbinder. However, Spellbinder uses his powers to strike Batman with hallucinations, causing Batman to see the gem as a beetle that worms its way inside of its hand, which causes Batman to throw the gem, which then falls into the sewer. After Batman jumps into the sewer, going after Spellbinder, the hallucinations get stronger. Spellbinder is now in possession of the Eye of Sarkana. Finally, Spellbinder has accomplished his goal. All these years of perfecting his powers, and all those years of searching for a means to enhance said powers, finally paid off. That hunger for power is now being fed. With this new power, he's able to make Batman see a completely different reality. Batman, being trapped within this hallucination, gets turned to stone and crashes into the ground, causing him to shatter. But we all know, Batman wouldn't be stopped by this. Batman, using all the will within his mind, breaks free from Spellbinder's hallucinations, causing the fake reality to fade and allowing Batman to catch up with Spellbinder. Batman then swiftly defeats Spellbinder with one kick. Spellbinder would go on to cameo within the episode Rumors, as well as appearing within the comics, with the issues that he's in being The Batman Strikes issue 31 and issue 32. Within issue 31, Spellbinder puts Batman under hypnosis again and has him kidnap Vicky Vale's friend, Betsy. And within issue 32, he teams up with other villains such as the Joker, Mr. Freeze, and so on. But we don't see any more of his personality than we do within the show, so I won't go over those. It's unclear what Spellbinder wanted to do with all that power and capability, but it's safe to assume it wasn't anything good. Like I said in the beginning, we don't get to see much of his actual personality, which is really my only gripe with this depiction of Spellbinder. However, we do know that he's obsessed with his abilities and has a deep hunger for enhancing them. He also appears to be rather intelligent, given how he plans his heist. I just wish we would have gotten to see more of what created this Spellbinder outside of his desire for power. But moving on from his personality into his design within this show is probably my favorite for Spellbinder. The sinister and mystic look works really well for him in my opinion. Then you have his voice actor who did an amazing job, with that voice actor being Michael Massey. And for those that didn't know, Michael played Fun Boy in the movie The Crow. Rest in peace, you legend.
Why? I have something on my face, don't I?
Killer Moth has always been more of a gimmick and joke character within the DC Comics, but within the 2004 The Batman universe, he's arguably more of a joke than ever before. Well, until he mutates, that is. But before we get to his mutation, we have to talk about his time before the mutation, which is where him being a joke comes in. You see, Killer Moth was heavily inspired by the Penguin to become a criminal. He wanted nothing more than to just work alongside him. Killer Moth would eventually go on to make his own outfit as well as his own cocoon gun, but the gun never seemed to work, seeing as it always shot back onto him rather than his target. Killer Moth also seems to have a bond with real moths as they're seen swarming around him. But as for Killer Moth himself, he appears to lack self-confidence as well as having low self-esteem, resulting in him coming off a bit shy and awkward. He also lies about his capabilities, which shows us that he just wants to be accepted by the group, but most importantly, by the Penguin. Killer Moth offers the Penguin his talents, if you will, but the Penguin brushes him off and assigns him to be his coffee boy, more or less. But it's a job that Killer Moth is beyond happy to have. The job itself didn't matter, but the opportunity to work alongside his role model meant everything to him. Even with the Penguin basically ignoring him and belittling him at times, Moth still admires him. He feels completely blessed just to be working alongside the Penguin. This opportunity gives Killer Moth a sense of meaning. He finally feels useful, even if his uses are for minor jobs like getting coffee. Going back to his low self-confidence and low self-esteem, Killer Moth, at any point, even with the Penguin being his role model, could have been his own boss, so to speak. But Killer Moth doesn't want that. He wants to work for the Penguin. He likes being his henchman. It provides a greater sense of pride and joy for him. However, going back to the episode itself, after being mocked and then assigned to coffee duty, Team Penguin goes on their first mission. While on said mission, Batman and his team arrive at the scene, where a fight between both teams ensues. During this battle, Killer Moth's gun fails to work, and then he proceeds to get knocked down with one punch by Batgirl. However, the fight ends with Team Penguin coming out on top and escaping. Sometime after, Killer Moth is driving the chemical agent they stole to their next heist, but the chemical begins to mutate Killer Moth, which turns him into a cocoon at first, but then he later emerges as the giant Killer Moth. This new Killer Moth still retained his personality, but now he has a greater sense of confidence due to his bulkier size. Killer Moth then yells at the rest of the team for disrespecting Penguin, all while saying that he's their boss and they'll do what he says, which again goes back to Killer Moth actually wanting to work for the Penguin rather than being a boss of his own. Even with his new form and abilities, which make him well then more capable of being a good criminal on his own, he still would rather just be a henchman for the Penguin, which not only goes back to the Penguin being his role model and inspiration, but it also goes back to Killer Moth's low self-esteem and self-confidence. He feels like he needs a boss, specifically the Penguin as his boss, as the Penguin provides that greater sense of meaning and service for Killer Moth. Those two things are the exact things that Killer Moth has been searching for his entire life. And now, not only does he have those things, but he also has the capabilities to prove just how useful he can be to the Penguin. But going back to the episode for a second, Team Batman arrives at the scene and a battle ensues. Killer Moth flies the Penguin up, and using his acid, he burns a hole in the wall to gain access to Robert Howard's building. They eventually reach the vault and retrieve the ruby-encrusted Penguin. However, as they're flying off, Batman pulls the Penguin off of Moth, and Killer Moth directs his focus onto Batgirl and Robin. The two sidekicks then work together, with Robin jumping on Killer Moth's back and redirecting him to crash on the roof where the Penguin is. And with that, Killer Moth, the Penguin, along with the rest of the crew, are now all defeated. Killer Moth would go on to cameo within the episode Rumors, however, it's only by a picture. Moth would also go on to appear within the comics, with the issues he's in being The Batman Strikes, issue 32, and The Batman Strikes, issue 49, but I won't be covering those as they don't really show much more of his personality. Killer Moth, much like Gearhead and Ragdoll, adds more variety and creativity to this universe. Like I said in the previous videos, when having characters like these, along with the major villains, it really brings much more to life within this world and within the show in general. Much like Gearhead and Spellbinder, my only gripe is that we don't get to see much of Killer Moth's personality. However, we do know that he wants to be accepted, which causes him to lie for the sake of fitting in. We also know he has low self-esteem and low self-confidence, which results in him being a little shy and coming off a bit awkward. Even in his speech, he almost sounds scared when talking at times. Speaking of his voice, Killer Moth was voiced by a reoccurring voice actor on this show, with that voice actor being Jeff Bennett, who yes, also voiced Ragdoll and Dave. Shout out to you, you legend. But now, on to his design. His design is simple, but not as simple as somebody like Cluemaster's design. Killer Moth is not only vibrant, which that alone already causes the viewer to place their eyes on him, but he also has a swarm of moths that fly around his face, which is something else that causes the viewer to look at Killer Moth. It's a simple touch, but it's also an amazing touch. Then you have his mutated form, which not only makes him more threatening, but also makes the character of Killer Moth more interesting, especially since he keeps his personality and mental state. Again, it's a simple touch, but it's also an amazing touch.
I realized I could never go down that road again, and I haven't.
Dr. Kirk Langstrom, aka Man-Bat, within the 2004 The Batman universe, is a scientist who worked for Wayne Enterprises. Langstrom started out as a good man, but much like many other characters within the DC universe, his obsessions drove him mad, with his main obsession being the Batman. You see, Langstrom had been researching the Batman and quickly grew obsessed. But he didn't just become obsessed with the Batman. He also became obsessed with the idea of becoming the new Batman. However, as I said before, Langstrom started out as a good guy. He would work hard for Wayne Enterprises, endlessly even. He devoted his life to his work, and with what little time he had in between, he would go see his niece. He even has a picture of her at his workstation, which shows us that he's not only a hard and dedicated worker, but he's also a loving family man. And that alone is something that's hard to come by in Gotham. But sadly, much like the other villains I've talked about, this side of Langstrom wouldn't last for long. Within the episode, The Man Who Would Be Bat, Langstrom is questioned by Bruce Wayne about his work. Langstrom then lies to Bruce, claiming all of his research was for finding a cure for his niece's deafness. Once Bruce finds out about the lie, he goes back to the lab where he finds Langstrom's research and is then confronted by Langstrom himself. After talking for a second, Langstrom drinks his new serum, causing him to transform and lash out uncontrollably. Something that Langstrom didn't account for when making the serum to become a bat was the overwhelming animalistic nature that comes along with it. He really thought he would remain in full control of his new monstrous self, allowing him to become the new Batman, the better Batman. Man-Bat would then go on to terrorize Gotham in search of his newfound need of blood. However, Man-Bat was eventually apprehended and the serum wore off, resulting in him being captured and brought to Arkham. Now, instead of talking about the next few episodes that Man-Bat appears in, like I normally would, I'm only going to be talking about the last episode he appears in, as it shows more of his actual personality. In the episode, Attack of the Terrible Trio, Langstrom is shown to have served his time in Arkham and is now rehabilitated. He even tells Batman that he wants nothing to do with that old monstrous version of himself, as he's left that old lifestyle and mentality in the past. Langstrom would then offer his assistance on the situation involving the Terrible Trio if ever needed, which shows us that the old, hardworking, and loving Langstrom is finally back. After the Terrible Trio causes more chaos, Batman returns to Langstrom and asks for the assistance that Langstrom offered. The assistance that Langstrom provides is a great help, as it's an antidote to the serum that the Terrible Trio is using. This again shows us that the old and humane version of Langstrom is back. With this episode, it shows us that Langstrom has finally moved on from his obsessions. It lets us in on how he regrets his past choices and only wants to make amends, with others and with himself. Langstrom is no longer blinded by rage and desire, and is now able to realize all the pain he caused. He's now able to see the mistakes of his past, and he wants nothing more than to correct those mistakes. Dr. Kirk Langstrom, or Man-Bat, has always been one of my personal favorite Batman villains, and I absolutely love that within this show, he gets a happy ending. He's no longer a prisoner to his own thoughts and emotions. He's finally found a way out of the prison cell that his mind created for him, and I seriously love that for him. But moving on to his design for a second, Langstrom himself has a slim appearance, with him being higher in age. As most scientists do, Dr. Langstrom dons a lab coat, which goes back to the simple yet fitting and phenomenal designs within this show. Then you have the Man-Bat design, which has always been rather simple itself, but the transformation to Man-Bat is where the design shines. It's almost something out of a horror movie, and I personally love that. And finally, you have his voice actor, with that being Peter McNichol. And for those that didn't know, he voiced Mad Hatter in the Arkham games. Shout out to Best Man Gamer for pointing that out. Now, as I said earlier, Man-Bat does appear in more than just the 2 episodes I talked about, and he even appears within the comics. However, I won't be covering those in this video.
Citizens of Gotham, tonight's results, while disappointing, do not surprise me.
Maximilian Zeus, or Maxi Zeus, within the 2004 The Batman universe, is a tech millionaire who's obsessed with Greek mythology. In this interpretation, he doesn't believe he's the actual god Zeus. Instead, he's just a power-hungry individual that has a god complex due to his narcissistic personality, who also so happens to be obsessed with Greek mythology. Maximilian would run for mayor of Gotham, with his run being his attempt at getting the masses to like him. But after a few questionable statements, the masses are quick to change their votes, resulting in Maximilian losing the race, which would cause him to lash out and set his evil plan into motion. Due to Max's narcissistic personality, he can't understand why the Gothamites would disagree with his ideals and with his plans for Gotham. Maxi may not believe he's the actual god Zeus, but he does believe that he knows best. He believes that he's the one that's supposed to lead the human race. Once Max is above Gotham in his new aircraft named the New Olympus, he begins to narrate to all of the citizens of Gotham. Max would then tell everyone listening that he'll correct the mistakes of the past and he'll remove their formerly known city hall to make a temple dedicated to himself. After some time, Maxi puts his sights on the Gotham Bay Bridge, where before attempting to remove it, he says,
"We must burn a few bridges if we are to keep our subjects contained."
This shows us that he doesn't even view the citizens as people, but instead, he views them as subjects. Maxi's god complex has twisted his perspective on more than just himself. Not only does he think of himself as the one true ruler, but he also truly believes that the citizens are nothing but pawns for his kingdom. This shows us that Maximilian has zero empathy or sympathy towards anyone. Maxi only sees through tunnel vision, with his sights being set on ruling Gotham as its king and more or less god due to all the power he would hold. Maximilian Zeus wants nothing more than to accomplish this goal, so much so that he's willing to throw away all of his humanity along with his morals just for the sake of being viewed the way he wants to be. However, Maximilian would never get to live that life out, as eventually, Batgirl and Batman board the New Olympus and they start taking the aircraft down from the inside. Once the New Olympus fails to operate correctly, Max's guards begin to abandon ship. Maximilian gets angry at the sight of all of them leaving, calling them cowards for giving up. He then attempts to bring down the Batman, but when the fight is at a standstill, the ship starts exploding from the inside, and Batman and Maximilian get thrown from the ship due to the explosions. Batman then grabs onto Maximilian, and by using a parachute, he gets them to safety. Afterwards, the New Olympus, thanks to Batgirl, is guided into the water so it won't hurt anyone when landing. Maximilian Zeus would go on to cameo within the episode Rumors, but it's only a small cameo, so I won't be covering that as it doesn't show any more of his personality that we haven't already seen. Maximilian Zeus, or Maxi Zeus, has always been an interesting character to me, and I absolutely love that he was in this show. Going back to what I said in the previous videos, him being here really brings more life to the show, as he's not only another new kind of threat, but his personality also brings something new to the table. But moving on to his design for a second, it's something else that makes his appearance so refreshing, such as the colorful armor, the older and stern man behind the armor, and the gloves that generate electricity. It's all done so well. As I said in the other videos, the unique designs in this show really go a long way. Now moving on to his voice actor, Maximilian Zeus is voiced by Phil Lamar, and for those that didn't know, Phil Lamar voiced Static in Static Shock, Samurai Jack in the show Samurai Jack, as well as Jon Stewart in the 2001 Justice League series and the 2004 Justice League Unlimited series. He even plays Marvin in Pulp Fiction. He truly is a legend, so shout out to him.
Okay, come on, Selina. Cats always land on their feet.
Selina Kyle, otherwise known as Catwoman within the 2004 The Batman universe, is a charity fundraiser by day and a cat burglar by night. Selina is one of the few criminals that actually doesn't commit crimes to hurt people and instead commits them for simple materialistic gain. She also actually has a heart as well as morals, which is something a lot of criminals within Gotham can't say. Selina within this show is more or less the same as she always is. She's highly acrobatic as well as extremely quiet, which results in her being a great thief. She's also very playful when it comes to her interactions with Batman, as she sees it as a flirtatious rivalry. Selina views this cat and mouse game, or cat and bat game if you will, just as that, a game, but it's a game that she's very much interested in. Selina is also shown to be very confident, and not because she's overly cocky and self-absorbed, but because she's confident in the skills that she's mastered. And like with every other depiction, Selina is quite the intellectual. She also shares a similarity with Gearhead, with that similarity being they both love the thrill. Not just the thrill of the crime either, but the thrill of being chased by the Batman. Something else that the series shows is that Catwoman loves all animals. And while yes, she prefers felines, she still believes that all animals belong in the wild without being harmed.
Wild animals belong in the wild, not in cages, and especially not being hunted.
Which goes back to what I said about Selina having a heart. And to go back to what I said about morals, she gives back a few of the things that she stole to Batman, which shows us that she's aware of her wrongdoings, and while yes it's an annoyance, she's capable of making the right decision. Normally, I would cover all the episodes the character I talk about appears in, but for this video, and maybe for a few other videos down the line, I'm just gonna focus on one episode. And the episode we'll be talking about today is Ragdoll to Riches. And the reasons for that is because the episode does a wonderful job at showing us the two sides of Selina, and the second reason is because I really feel like Ragdoll made a great villain for Catwoman. If you watched my Ragdoll video, you'll remember me saying that Ragdoll was very much the Joker for Catwoman. The both of them are similar in many ways, and their personalities also kinda mirror each other, with Ragdoll being the more unhinged and eccentric version of Catwoman, much like Joker is to Batman. The episode Ragdoll to Riches not only shows us how well of a villain Ragdoll would make for Catwoman, but as I said earlier, it also shows us a good blend of Selina and Catwoman, which lets us in on her life outside of her crimes. The episode also shows us her morals that I spoke about earlier, as well as her being able to make the right decisions. As at the end of the episode, she gives the gems back to Batman and makes her escape. We then cut to Wayne Manor, where Selina and Bruce are talking about the gems. Bruce tells Selina that he sold the gems so that she could use the money for a charity of her choice. Once Bruce calls to find out where the money went, he learns that Selina donated the money to the Gotham City Pet Shelter Network. and that news would be the closer for the episode. Even though I only talked about one episode, Catwoman appears in many episodes throughout the series, as well as appearing within many of the comics, but if I were to list them all, we'd be here all day, so I'll spare y'all from that. So something else that made this Catwoman stand out to me personally was the long Halloween inspired design. It's truly one of my favorites within the series. It's such a good and fitting design, and it works really well with the rest of the designs within the show. Another thing that made this Catwoman so great was the amazing voice actress behind her, with that being Gina Gershon, who played Melanie Hawkins in the show Brooklyn Nine-Nine, which if y'all haven't seen, I highly recommend. Overall, this Catwoman is one of my favorites, as we actually get to see a softer and more understanding side to her. We also get a look into her life outside of crime, where we see that she's a charity fundraiser, which adds more depth to her character. She's truly not even a villain at all, and that's another thing that makes her so great. I mean, yes, Catwoman commits crimes, but she doesn't commit them for the sake of hurting others. And that alone is something a lot of the villains within Gotham can't say, which makes Catwoman all the more refreshing, especially after dealing with so many criminals that only want to harm people. Catwoman truly was a perfect fit for this show, and, in my opinion, the show did her character justice. Well, that about wraps up this video. So real quick, I want to go ahead and thank every one of you who clicked on this video. It truly means the world to me. I definitely plan on doing another one of these compilation videos with the rest of the villains I talk about in the future. But with all that said, it's been ugly, and I'll see y'all in the next one.